Hello, everyone. It's definitely the same day. Don't worry about it. This is the next part of the top 150 book list that got a little bit confused in the middle because I realized I just didn't have Shadow of the Torturer on the list at all. So while the one that I'm recording this right after I uploaded 125 to 101. And I, the entire time, was like, darn, it's 124. I messed up. Actually, I mean, my two mess ups kind of cancel each other out. Anyways, but then I re-messed up, so this now starts at 75. So this is going to be 75 to 51, whatever. And we're going to continue to go fast. I'm actually really proud that the 125 to 101 was shorter than the 150 to 126. That's not keeping up. Anyway, coming in at number 75, we are getting pretty serious here. Someone asked, like, where we are ratings-wise. We are at a 9.1 out of 10 at this point. And number 75 is The Curse of Chalion by Louis McMaster Bujold, an author that we've heard quite a bit from. I think this, in terms of plotting, has a good case for being her best plotted novel. I reread this recently because we did it for the book club, and the book club really liked it. It's so solid in terms of, like, storytelling, just, like, character and plot, incredibly detail-oriented. The world and the way the religion interacts with various characters is also well done. And just a book that's hard to find something to criticize for. Kazaril is a great narrator. I don't quite like him as much as Miles. And there's also a bunch of really good side characters, but I think more of the appeal of the character work is Miles, despite the supporting cast still being excellent. Coming in at 74 is A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin, which is actually good in a lot of really similar ways to Curse of Chalion. They are both authors that I think their main appeal, the main place that they stand out, is character writing, and both, like, for Curse of Chalion the first time I read it, and Game of Thrones the last time I reread it after a long break, the thing that actually mostly impressed me for both was their plotting. I think A Game of Thrones is one of the best plotted fantasy novels that I have read. It does such a good job while introducing the, like, 8 POVs of however many they are, of having each POV character move the story of multiple other POV characters, except Daenerys, because there's not much you can do there. Incredibly efficient character writing. You can get to just know the general vibe of people so quickly. I think my favorite example of this is, like, the first line Viserys says in Daenerys 1, which is, like, it's a reasonably normal thing to say. Like, it's not like he's being outright annoying, but you can tell he's annoying literally from the first line. I'm scrolling through to find this. This is live. No, damn it, I accidentally found Daenerys 2. I must have missed Daenerys 1. Whatever. If you own Game of Thrones, go find Daenerys 1 and go look at the first line of dialogue that Viserys Targaryen says. And it's annoying. Maybe that was Daenerys 1 and Viserys just doesn't sound conversation. Anyways, coming in at 73, we have Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee, which took some huge structural risks. It's the type of book where if you just look at, like, what the structure is, you would expect it to be extremely divisive. It covers a huge amount of time and a huge amount of characters. It's much more zoomed out than the previous two novels, and it kind of doesn't it's much less focused on the micro stories and micro conflicts. Well, in book 1 there might be, like, conflict over a specific area between the Jade clans, and it might focus on, like, how are we going to win that. This is much more focused on the large picture, but it doesn't, like, it just gives you little bits from the little picture and lets you put together the larger picture really cleverly. Excellent character writing. I mean, really, all 3 of the last 3 have been some really excellent character writing, and the next one as well. 3, like, extremely well-balanced books in a row. I mean, Jade Legacy is one of the most, like, well-received by its fans final books that I've ever seen, so it's not a surprise that it's on this list. Coming 72 is A Clash of Kings by George R. R. Martin. I don't think Clash of Kings is quite as tight or, like, has as much forward momentum as A Game of Thrones does, which really is pushed forward by its central, the central mystery. But I do just find the character writing in Clash of Kings to be stronger. This is my favorite of the Tyrion books, and I think he has, like, truly a delightful plot line in this novel. I also think I like Jon even more in this novel. I really like some of the Arya chapters laid on are really excellent. The entire second half of the book is pretty crazy. So it does beat out a Game of Thrones for me. And coming in at 71 is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, the first and only one of 2 Adrian Tchaikovsky books I have read. The amount this manages to do is truly wild in the page count it has. Both the human storyline and the spider storyline were excellent. I would say, like, man, these 5 have got to be some of the most, like, well-rounded novels of the entire list, where I don't think it's, like, one thing standing out, but I don't really have many, like, cons for all 5 of the novels for, like, this section. Man, the ending of this is really good as well. It works as a standalone. It became a series. Really good character writing. Just, it covers so much ground in terms of ideas based on his starting ideas. The escalation at the start, it's my favorite start of these novels for sure. Anyways, moving on to 70 through 66. Also worth mentioning, because I was mentioning it before, that is going to be the last time you see Adrian Tchaikovsky on this. That'll also be going to be the last time you see Fonda Lee. You will see more of George and Louis Bujold. Moving on to number 70. Those are actually, this is the top 9.1 out of 10, and it is The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. We're going to have 3 books in a row here that, like, 15-year-old me would have been proud, because I think the next 3 at one point would have been, like, all in my top 5 of all time. This is the first book we have got to. No, that's not true. Because I think technically The Final Empire was my favorite book when I read it all those days ago. And then The Well of Ascension I liked more. And then Hero of Ages I liked more. So this, when I read it, would have been my favorite book ever. It wouldn't have stayed my favorite book for very long. But this was one of the books that was at 1.1. Now it's 70. Things have changed. That being said, it's still crazy. It's still one of the best endings that I've ever read. The way everything comes together is chef's kiss. I'm also a huge fan of the character cast for this book. Vin especially. It's got some just crazy action sequences as well. I love Hero of Ages. Still do. Think I always will. And then this book was never my favorite book ever, but Princeps Fury was probably pretty close at one point. This is book 5 in Codex Alera, which this and the next one will be the last time you have to hear me be about, like, yes, I love Codex Alera. I think I always will love Codex Alera. This has some of my favorite final act in Codex Alera. I think the next one is Cursor's Fury by Jim Butcher, which I think is my single favorite plot line in Codex Alera. This is also the one that, like, when other people read, I'm the most excited to see their reactions. People reacting to the epilogue of Cursor's Fury is my happy place. I think Princeps Fury is probably more solid in terms of all the plot lines being excellent. Well, but I think my favorite plot line is the plot line in Cursor's Fury. I knocked stuff over. Coming in at 67 is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is going to be the only time Susanna Clarke... By the way, Princeps Fury was the first 9.2 out of 10. We're now in 9.2 range. This is going to be the first and only time Susanna Clarke shows up on this list. It is, very different from the last 3 books. Got to be some of the best line-by-line writing I've ever read in terms of just, like, mood and vibe. Also a compelling mystery and a protagonist that's easier to root for, but I think this is definitely, like, this is the vibes book. Coming in at number 66, an even shorter book, we have The Wilful Princess and the Piebald Prince by Robin Hobb. Josh on the first of these commented that he thought there might be 10 Robin Hobb books on this list. There will be more than 10 Robin Hobb books on this list. Piebald Prince is excellent. This takes place before Assassin's Apprentice, and it has very little dialogue, and the idea of who the characters still comes across so strongly. The paranoia for what you're actually being told comes across so strongly, and the lasting, like, one of my favorite things is, like, reading this after you've read a good amount of Fitz's story, because this does take place, like, in the same setting as Fitz's story does, but, like, generations before, and events in this story are still impacting people during Fitz's life, and it's just the knock-on effect is so well done. Piebald Prince is so good. Coming in at number 65 is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is another author. I've only read 2 novels by this person, and Fall of Hyperion If you're waiting for it, it's not going to get here. But Hyperion definitely is on the list, no doubt. The Scholar's Tale is one of the best things that I've ever read. The Hyperion, I don't think is as consistent front to back as some of the other novels I have in this area. Like, I think Detective's Tale is like, it's pretty good. Soldier's Tale is weird as hell. It's got some good stuff, but it's kind of like, eh. And then Consul Tale is pretty excellent. But then, like, Poet's Tale, Priest's Tale, Scholar's Tale especially, it's legitimately, like, one of the best chapters I've ever read in my entire life. Every word in that chapter is the correct word. And the ridiculous high highs get it up here. 64 is a first-time appearance author who is going to appear again. This is another one of those series that I will fight for how awesome it is, and it's Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter. I think Evan Winter, with a sample size of 2, granted, has the best pacing of, like, anyone that I've ever read. Both of his books are paced so addictively where it's like they're not even that ridiculously fast, but they just never overstay their welcome to any degree. I think Fires of Vengeance, in terms of character writing, is actually clearly better than Rage of Dragons, but I like Rage of Dragons more just because I like the content of Rage of Dragons more. Yes, Rage of Dragons will be here on the later of the list. This book also has the best POV swap I've ever read, where, like, you get a scene that if it's in the point of view that, like, every other author would put it, it would be like, that's cool, but then it switches point of view, and it's harrowing, and it's great. Next up is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir at spot 63. This is going to be Andy Weir's first and only appearance on this list. I've only read 2 Andy Weir books. I like The Martian. It was not in this range. Project Hail Mary, I think, is another one of the best paced novels I've ever read. I remember I started this novel, I think, after midnight one day. I was just like, I'd finished the previous book, and I was like, I need to go to sleep. I'll just read before I go to bed. I'll read like 25 pages because it's late already. And I read like 150. And I was like, do I want to pull an all-nighter? And I was like, no, let's go to sleep. And then I spent the entire day at work being like, I need to know what happens in this book. It's also got an amazing ending. Definitely there's like some of the like flashback. Some of the like side characters are pretty just there. Like, I'm not going to claim Andy Weir is like some great character writer, but damn if the story isn't good. Number 62 is Turncoat by Jim Butcher. This is novel number 11 in the Dresden Files, and I think it's one of the best non-outlier Dresden books out there. Like, there are some books like Changes in Battleground are the two that like have their own unique circumstances. Turncoat is a standard Dresden book. It does take about twice as long to get going as Changes, but that's because it gets going on the second line instead of the first line. Has some of Jim's best like character writing in terms of shedding light on someone who you might have had a very strong opinion of and like changing that opinion without really fundamentally changing who that character is at all. Has some of the best action scenes, also some of the funniest sequences when they keep getting back to the apartment. Mouse is glorious. So yeah, I mean, it's Turncoat. Number 61 is Sailing to Sarantium by Guy Gavriel Kay. This is the first half of the Sarantium Mosaic. The main downside of this is that it is, I would say, more of a setup book. A lot of the payoff is in Lord of Emperors. It's more about getting from one walled city to the other. It's got one of the best like sequences of interacting with the supernatural that I've ever read. It's got a pretty great chariot race in its own right. It does have one chapter that is focused on political scene that is amazing. The writing is Guy Gavriel Kay. It's one of Guy Gavriel Kay's best settings. It's one of his best like cast of characters. Yeah, I mean, it's Guy Gavriel Kay. What do you expect? He's gonna be high on the list. Okay, coming in spot number 60 is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. This is another first appearance of an author. It will not be the last appearance of the author. Only really got to, I guess she has written the YA books, but I haven't read those. I've only read 2. I think Mizaki is one of the best protagonists that I've ever read about. Emma Wong is now 2 for 2 on protagonists, being really incredibly good. Sword of Kaigen has some things that are pretty clearly janky. like there's some of the ways like the writing of people speaking different languages done, like in terms of the actual form that came from it not going through a traditional publisher, that ended up being very weird. And the last chapter is very weird, and some of the world building is weird. So that holds it down. But like that's the stuff that makes it a 9.1 instead of being one of my favorite books of all time. That doesn't drag it down from being a book that isn't completely awesome, because it has some of the best scenes that I have ever read in my life. It's got one of the best falling actions that I've ever read in my entire life. It's like weird structurally that also works so well, and I think that aspect also would have been changed if it was put through a traditional publisher, and the book would have been worse for it. It also, similar to Turncoat, it does the thing where it like gives you one point of view of a character, and then when you learn them more deeply, you grow to understand them to such a greater degree. It's cinema. Next is The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. Been a while since we got some Wheel of Time. We're going to get some more on here. Shadow Rising is many people's favorite Wheel of Time books. It is one of my favorite Wheel of Time books. It has one of the best, like, the most genius sequences. The Glass Pillar sequence is some of the best, like, fantasy culture building that I have ever read in my entire life. I know that culture is very similar to the Fremen, but also, like, it's hard to, if you read this and you're just like, this is just the Fremen, like, no offense, read it better. At this point, all of the main characters have come into their own. This is definitely a strong book for really a lot of the main cast. And it just expands the world to a degree that it might expand the world the most of any of the characters. Next up is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This is the first and last time you will see Scott Lynch on this list. I do like all three books in The Gentleman Bastards, but Lies of Locke Lamora is comfortably my favorite. I remember I was like chilling along with this, being like, oh, you know, this is very character-driven book. It's going to be like a good, solid 4-star book. And then the plot hit me like a train, and then it was 4 a.m., and the book was finished. And I was like, oh. So that happened. Scott Lynch is an artist at writing banter and cursing. Some of the best dialogue writers that you will run into. Great cast of character. It has consequences. It has stakes. It has payoff. Works pretty well as a standalone as well. Next up, Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. Not the last time you're going to see Patrick Ness. I think Monsters of Men was already on here. I think that was like... Was that right near the bottom? Did it sneak in here? I forget. Yeah, Monsters of Men is on here. So this is going to be the second, but not the last time you see Patrick Ness. This is book 1 of the Chaos Walking trilogy, which has... like, the amount of interesting things chapter 1 introduces from, like, a world-building, plot, and hook perspective is wild. It has one of the most hateable villains that I've ever read. This is also an addicting book. This is also, like, a stay up till 2 a.m. finishing it book. It also has, like, I remember just such a beautiful, touching moment as well. Just a really, really excellent book. It's easily my favorite book in the Chaos Walking trilogy, and I think May was pretty high up on my top book list of the year that I read it. And number 56 is The Last 9.2, and it is Memories of Ice by Steven Erikson. This was... I remember when I read Malazan, this was what I thought the consensus favorite book was. I don't know that many people who would say Memories of Ice is their favorite Malazan book, but it's just like... it's one of the more universally agreed to be very good Malazan books. It's probably one of the more standard structurally ones, and it is just so epic. It's got so many crazy moments. The characters really come to life. You get a mix of like brilliant reoccurring characters from Gardens of the Moon, who I think I like all of them more in Memories of Ice, and it introduces some new characters who are also... it has so much stuff, and it's got like one of Erikson's, I think, favorite structures is like the climax in the middle of book and then like another climax at the end, and they're both so bonkersly good. It's wild. Yeah, I mean it's pretty close to top tier Erikson, so it's gonna be really excellent. All right, and coming in number 55 is The Crippled God. This is the first book that gets a 9.3 out of 10. This is obviously the conclusion to Malazan, Book of the Fallen. It definitely has a lot of Steven Erikson at the absolute peak of his powers. It's got some of the absolute wildest, most crazy shit you will ever read. It's got the best thematic stuff in the entire series. It's got Tavor. It also, though, has way too much Ublala Pung. And that drops it a full, just cut Ublala Pong from this novel, and Crippled God makes it up 30 spots. I'm only slightly joking, but it's mostly completely awesome. It is, again, one of the most well-received final entries to a series that I know of, and for very good reason. I feel like I don't need to talk that much about this. It's the bloody Crippled God. You either know or you don't. Next up, we have two Vorkosigan novels, both of which I don't own physically. 54 is The Warrior's Apprentice by Louis McMaster Bujold, which, might not be in terms of ambition or scale at all close to The Crippled God in any way, but it is just literally some of the most fun I've ever had reading a novel, without exaggeration. And then it also pulled my feet under me and hit me with a gut punch that was truly memorable. I was on vacation while reading this, and I was reading something, and then we went on a hike, and I was just the entire time while on that trek through, I think we were in Sapa, Vietnam. I was just like, man, what is gonna happen here? It introduces Miles Vorkosigan, who is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, and it is just such a delight. And number 53 is Brothers in Arms, by Louis McMaster Bujold, which also is following Miles Vorkosigan. It's harder to talk about. It introduces some elements that are so emotionally powerful for who Miles's character is, and also maintains a lot of the entertainment that Miles has. I actually can't believe Lois did some of the stuff she did in this book. I was wild. But yeah, Brother in Arms, it's Vorkosigan. You guys know my thoughts on Vorkosigan. After that, 52 is Small Favor by Jim Butcher. I just reread this on audio. This is my favorite pre-Changes Dresden novel. Turncoat is my second pre-Changes Dresden novel. The last chapter of this book is the best pre-Changes chapter best chapter in the Dresden Files pre-Changes. Fight Me. It's got a couple, it's got maybe the best escalation plot twist and one of the best reveals in the entire series. The character writing, the character relationships, the climax is cinema. It's so good. Small Favor. As you can see, we're getting pretty positive about these books, which is also true for Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay, which on the other hand, screw Tigana, because Tigana hogs all the attention for Guy Gavriel Kay, because a bunch of people only read Tigana and then nothing else. And note, I really like Tigana, but note that Tigana is 51st on this list, and I am not saying that this is going to be the last time you hear the name Guy Gavriel Kay. This will actually not be the last time you hear any of the authors on here. There will be more from Erikson, Bujold, Butcher, and Kay. Tigana does have a grandioseness that is hard to be matched by some of the other novels. It definitely, I think, it requires more buy-in to the central premise than a lot of the other ones does, but it does have some of the most epic and powerful and well-written moments. But Kay's just written a lot of those. So it's still my fifth or sixth favorite Guy Gavriel Kay novel. Anyway, that concludes the spot number 51. Next up is the top 50. Let me know which are the books that you're still standing there he has, this book's going to be on this list, right? Yeah, have a good day, everyone.